Hey guys, welcome back to more malicious compliance Reddit stories. In this Ripe Stories video, my business partner fired me because I look too young. He told me that I was bad for the image, but he completely forgot that every single permit that kept his food truck legal was in my name. What I did next changed his entire life. Let's dive right into the story. And the first one is from r/maliciouscompliance and is titled "Boss fired me for being too young, forgot that I own the permit." So this happened a while back when I was running a food truck business with my former partner. I'm still pretty young, mid-20s, but I've been in the food service industry since I was 16 and I know my stuff. The problem is, I've got one of those faces that makes me look like I'm still in high school, which becomes relevant later. So my business partner was this guy in his 40s who I will call Jericho because he was such a massive tool that he deserves to be named and shamed. Jericho was all about the money side of things while I handled the actual food service operations. When we started the partnership, I was the one who got certified for food handling and applied for all the permits we needed to operate legally. See, in Ontario, you need someone with a food handler certificate on site whenever you're serving food, and you need a mobile vendor permit to operate a food truck. Both of these were in my name because Jericho could not be bothered to learn anything about the business. He had no interest in it, he just wanted to make money. "That's what I have you for," he would say whenever I suggested he should get certified too, just as a backup. "You handle the food nerd stuff, I will handle making us money." Our partnership agreement clearly stated that I held all the operational permits and certifications while he handled marketing and finances. Everything was documented properly because my dad, who has dealt with business partnerships before, insisted we get it all in writing. The agreement made it clear that both permits were essential for legal operation and that I was responsible for maintaining them. The truck was doing pretty well actually. We had a regular spot downtown during lunch hours and were getting booked for festivals, events, and Jericho was happy with the profits, but I started noticing that he was getting weird about my appearance whenever we had busy periods or important customers. He would say, "Maybe you should stay in the back more when we're at the business district. Let me handle the important customers." I thought he was just being protective of the business relationship stuff, but it got worse. He started making comments about how I looked too casual or too young for certain events. I would catch him apologizing to customers about my age, saying things like, "Don't worry, he knows what he's doing, even though he looks like a kid." This actually came to a head when we got booked for this big summer festival that was supposed to be our biggest payday yet. The festival had strict vendor requirements and a waiting list of food trucks wanting to get in. We had been approved months in advance and Jericho was already counting the money we would make. About 2 weeks before the festival, Jericho pulled me aside after we had closed up for the day. I could tell something was up because he had that look he got when he thought he was being clever about business decisions. "Listen, I've been thinking," he said, "and I don't think this partnership is working out anymore." I was confused because we had been making good money and everything seemed to be going smoothly. "What do you mean? Did I do something wrong?" "It's not personal, it's just business. You know, you look too young and it's not professional. When people see someone who looks like they are barely out of high school running a food truck, it doesn't inspire confidence. I need someone older, more mature looking to be the face of this operation." I stared at him. "Jericho, I'm 25. And I'm the one with all the certifications and permits." "Yeah, about that." He waved his hand dismissively. "I'll handle getting new permits. Can't be that complicated. I've already found someone who's going to be much better for our image. He's got experience and he actually looks like a professional chef." "You are firing me from my own business?" "I'm buying you out of the partnership. Here's what I'm offering." He handed me a piece of paper with a number on it that was laughably low. Maybe 20% of what my share was actually worth based on our earnings. I looked at the paper and then back at him. "This is insulting, Jericho. You know this business is worth way more than this." "Take it or leave it. And I need the truck keys by tomorrow. We've got bookings to maintain and I cannot have any disruption to the business." The whole conversation felt surreal. Here was a guy who had never bothered to get certified himself, firing me for looking too young while depending entirely on my credentials to operate legally. But Jericho seemed completely confident that he could just figure out the permit situation later. Now, here's where I probably should have gotten my lawyer involved right away, but I was so shocked and angry that I was not thinking clearly. And by the way guys, if you would be in the same situation as OP, how would you have reacted? Let me know in the comments, and by the way, if you enjoy the malicious compliance stories, then please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, if you want to post some star emojis in the comments, that helps me with the YouTube algorithm as well. Thank you so much. So instead I asked him one simple question that turned out to be the most important thing I said during this whole mess. So just to confirm, you're terminating our partnership. That's final? Yeah, absolutely. This decision is made. I need you to drop off the keys tomorrow, and we'll settle the buyout through lawyers if you want to be difficult about it. And you're planning to keep operating the truck immediately? Of course, I'm keeping it running. I've got that new guy starting Monday, and we've got the festival booking next weekend. I'm not losing money while we sort out paperwork. I nodded slowly. Okay then, well, I'll drop the keys off tomorrow morning. Jericho looked surprised that I was not fighting him more, unaware that I was just maliciously complying with his ridiculous demands. Good, I'm glad you're reasonable about this. Maybe this will work out better for both of us. That night, I called my dad and explained what happened. He was furious, not just about Jericho screwing me over, but about the legal implications of what Jericho was planning here. Son, he said, do you realize that all the permits and certifications are in your name? If that truck operates without you there, it is operating illegally. And since your name is on everything, you could be held responsible if something goes wrong. Someone gets food poisoning or there's an accident, and guess whose name is on the liability? That is when it clicked. Jericho was so focused on getting rid of me that he didn't think through the logistics of actually running the truck legally. He just assumed he could figure out the paperwork stuff later, but permits are not something you can just transfer overnight, and getting certified takes weeks of studying and scheduling tests. My dad continued, you need to protect yourself legally. If Jericho wants to operate that truck, he needs to do it with his own permits, not yours. The next morning I dropped off the keys as promised, and Jericho was there with his new hire, a guy who was probably in his 50s with a big mustache and chef's hat. Jericho seemed really pleased with himself, like he had just made the smartest business decision ever. See, now this is what a professional food service operation should look like, Jericho said, gesturing to mustache guy. No offense, but image matters in this business. None taken, I replied. So just to clarify one more time, you're taking full responsibility for operating the truck from here on out, right? Absolutely, I've got everything under control. This is going to work out much better. Famous last words. I handed over the keys and walked away. Jericho had no idea what was coming, but I knew exactly what I had to do to protect myself. As soon as I got home, I realized I needed to protect myself legally. Since Jericho had terminated our partnership but was still planning to operate under my permits, I was technically liable for anything that went wrong, so I did exactly what any responsible permit holder should do. I called the local public health unit to inform them that I was no longer associated with the operation and that someone else was now using my permits without authorization. The woman on the phone took down all the details carefully. So, sir, you're saying the truck is planning to operate with your permits but without you present? That's correct. As of yesterday, I'm no longer employed or associated with the business, but they are planning to continue operating using permits and certifications that are in my name only. This is a serious violation of health and safety regulations, sir. We will need to send an inspector to verify the situation. Mobile food vendors must have the name permit holder present during operation or have transferred permits to a new certified operator. I understand, I just want to make sure I'm not held liable for their operations since I'm no longer involved. Well, you did the right thing by calling. We will handle this appropriately. Jericho, meanwhile, was so eager to prove that he didn't need me that he jumped right into operating the truck. He didn't want to apply for new permits or get this new guy certified. No, he figured he would deal with the bureaucratic stuff eventually and just keep making money in the meantime. In his mind, permits were just paperwork that did not really matter as long as nobody complained. Well, suffice to say, the health inspector showed up sometime later while they were set up at our usual lunch spot downtown. To be clear, I wasn't there to see it, but word travels fast in the food truck community, and I got the full story from other vendors who witnessed the whole thing and eavesdropped for me. Apparently, the inspector walked up during the busy lunch rush hour and asked to see the mobile vendor permit and food handler certification. "Where's this person?" the inspector asked. "Oh, he doesn't work here anymore," Jericho said. "We're in the process of updating the paperwork, but everything is fine." "So you're operating without the name permit holder present?" "Well, my new guy here has plenty of experience." "Does he have current food handler certification for Ontario?" "I've got experience from Alberta, but I haven't taken the Ontario test yet. Jericho said we would get that sorted out soon." The inspector said, "I'm sorry, but this operation is in violation of multiple health and safety regulations. You're operating with permits that belong to someone who is not present, and you have no certified food handler on site as required by law. I'm shutting you down immediately." Jericho apparently started getting loud and demanding to speak to his supervisor. "This is ridiculous, it's just paperwork. We're serving the same food we always serve." But the inspector was not having it. "Sir, these are serious violations that put public safety at risk. The truck cannot operate until you have proper permits in the name of the actual operator and a certified food handler present at all times during the operation." They had to dump all the food they had prepped for a lunch rush, close down in front of a line of waiting customers, and leave with a citation that came with hefty fine. Jericho lost a whole day's revenue and had to refund customers who had already paid, but the real disaster was that Jericho had completely forgotten about the festival booking that weekend. This was a big multi-day event with thousands of people, and food vendors had to be approved months in advance with verified permits and insurance. Jericho showed up Saturday morning with his truck, expecting to make thousands we had been counting on, only to be told by the festival organizers that his permits were not valid and he couldn't operate. I found out later from other vendors that Jericho had shown up at the festival expecting to just operate, but the organizers turned him away when they couldn't verify his permits matched the approved vendor list. The festival had strict liability requirements and they could not risk having unlicensed vendors on site. That festival would have been worth thousands in revenue over the weekend, and Jericho just missed the whole thing. Even worse, word spread among the festival circuit organizers about the permit issues, and Jericho found himself having trouble getting approved for future events. Festival organizers talk to each other, and nobody wants to deal with vendors who have compliance problems or who might create liability issues for everyone. Meanwhile, Jericho was discovering that getting new permits is not exactly a quick process. The mobile vendor permit application takes weeks to process, even when you have all your documentation in order, and that is assuming you don't have any compliance issues on your record. The funniest part, though, was getting a call from Jericho later. By then he had realized just how screwed he was, and he was practically begging me to come back. "Look, I think we both overreacted, man," he said, trying to sound casual. "Maybe we can work something out. I will give you a raise, more control over operations, and whatever you want. I just need to get the truck running again." "I thought you said I looked too young and unprofessional for the business." "I was being stupid. You know the business better than anyone. The permit stuff is more complicated than I thought. What do you say we put this behind us?" "Well, Jericho, I'm sorry, but I'm already moving forward with my own truck." "Your own truck? You cannot do that. We had a non-compete agreement." Well, actually, we did not have a non-compete agreement. Jericho had been so confident in his business sense and so eager to get the partnership started that he never thought to include one in our contract. My lawyer had pointed this out during the settlement negotiations, noting that Jericho could have prevented exactly this situation with better planning. "Read the contract, Jericho. There's no non-compete clause." "But you cannot just steal my business model." "I'm not stealing anything, Jericho. I'm just starting a legal food truck operation with my own permits and certifications. You know, the way it's supposed to be done from the beginning." I could hear him getting frustrated on the other end. "This is unbelievable, after everything I did for you." You mean after you fired me for looking too young? Yeah, Jericho, thanks for the life lesson about the importance of proper documentation. By this point, Jericho was starting to understand that his simple paperwork problem was actually a fundamental business operation issue that was going to take months to resolve properly, and within a few months I had my own truck up and running. I kept things simple at first, just me and one part-time helper, who I made sure got properly certified before we started operations. I focused on the same lunch spots where Jericho and I used to operate, and since Jericho still could not get his permit situation sorted out, I basically stepped right into the market gap he had created by shutting himself down. The festival organizers welcomed me back with open arms. Having my own properly documented operation made their job easier, and they were happy to have a reliable vendor who understood compliance requirements and who would not create headaches with last-minute permit problems. Jericho eventually got his truck running again, but by then he had lost most of his prime locations and festival contracts, and the food truck community is smaller than you think, and his reputation for permit problems and unprofessional business practices followed him around. Plus, he had burned through his cash reserves during the weeks he couldn't operate, so he was operating on a much tighter budget than before. Starting over also meant that Jericho had to rebuild relationships with suppliers, customers, and event organizers, and many of the regular lunch customers had found other options transactions by now during his shutdown period, and getting back into the festival rotation meant starting at the bottom of waiting lists he had previously been established on. The last I heard, he was struggling to break even while I was booking more festivals than I could handle. Turns out that looking young is not actually a problem when you're professional, reliable, and properly licensed. Amen. Most customers care more about good food and fast service than whether the person serving them looks like they could be carded at a bar. My regular lunch customers actually commented on how much smoother things ran when I didn't have Jericho around getting in the way or making comments about my appearance. Several of them mentioned actually that they had always thought Jericho was kind of pompous and that they preferred dealing with me directly. And yeah, my new truck is doing great. I've hired 2 more people, both properly certified, and we are expanding to catering services for corporate events and private parties. I've learned to handle both the operational side and the business development side, which makes me more of a complete business owner than I was when I was splitting responsibilities with Jericho. The best part is that I actually look exactly the same as I did when he fired me. Customers don't seem to have any problem with my youthful appearance when I'm serving them great food quickly and professionally. If anything, some customers seem to prefer dealing with someone who looks approachable rather than stuffy and overly formal. Update to the story. Hey everyone, it's been about a year since my last post and a few of you reached out asking whatever happened to Jericho. So Jericho's food truck is officially dead. After missing out on the entire summer festival circuit and burning his cash reserves, he tried cutting corners on ingredient quality to make up his lost margins. Well, surprise surprise, the customers noticed. His new professional-looking chef ended up quitting after 2 of Jericho's paychecks bounced, and without a certified handler again, the health inspector paid him another fatal visit. Last I heard from some friends, his truck is sitting in his driveway with a massive for sale sign on the windshield. It's been rotting there for 4 months. As for me, my business is thriving. My single truck expanded into a small fleet of 3. I recently hired a dedicated manager for our new corporate catering division, and we just locked down a multi-year exclusive contract with the city's biggest summer music festival, the exact one Jericho originally got booted from. Thanks for all the support, guys. And yeah, guys, if you ask me, Jericho sounds like one of these typical finance bros, especially when he said, "I handle the money, you handle the nerd stuff" line, and then he got immediately bodied by the health inspector because he forgot that the government always wants its paperwork. This Jericho guy was an absolute joke, if you ask me. Then again though, I would say that OP's dad is the real MVP of this story for insisting to get put everything in writing from the very beginning. If OP didn't have all these documents and the partnership agreement explicitly stating that he held all the operational permits, then maybe Jericho could have gotten away with all of this. That is why documentation and paperwork matters, guys. Also, then again, I'm really curious what goes on in the heads of these bosses that fire the only person who legally keeps their business out of health code jail, you could say. I guess these folks really lack brain cells. Now let's read some Reddit comments. The first one said, "Jericho tried to push you out of a successful business that relied entirely on your legal credentials, and also calling the health unit was not just revenge, it was the right move to legally protect yourself from liability. He brought the immediate shutdown, the hefty fines, and the lost festival revenue entirely on himself by refusing to learn the operational side of the business. He was an idiot." And another Reddit comment said, "Look, in the real world of business, image is everything. Jericho was completely right that a kid who looks like they are still in high school does not inspire confidence when people are buying food. You were his partner, and instead of acting like a professional, you actively sabotaged him by calling the public health unit just because your feelings got hurt over a buyout offer. You basically stole his business model since you knew there was a non-compete clause in the contract. You should have just let him sort out his paperwork on his own time instead of being so vindictive and trying to ruin his livelihood. Grow up and learn how the real world works." And yeah, guys, that is exactly what I would recommend to this Reddit commenter. Grow up and learn how the real world works. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. And the next one is a beautiful malicious compliance story that is titled, "Boss thought we all needed a reminder of our job duties." So to start off, I want to give a little context and backstory to set the scene for you. A couple of years ago, I took a job in the kitchen of a private healthcare facility. I've been working in kitchens for more than 10 years before this in various roles, and I knew I was overqualified for the job, but a close friend was already working there and had asked that I come fill a spot because they were short-staffed. I wanted a low-stress job for the time being that could accommodate my schedule of working both jobs before switching careers altogether. It's a relatively small kitchen with only a head chef. We can call her Jessica, and at most maybe 2 to 3 other people on any shift. Head chef is a bit of an exaggeration, as this lady sat in her office chair, dealt with paperwork, and occasionally walked around the kitchen to give us criticism on whatever we were working on at the time. I've had a lot of bosses throughout the years, and she was by far the worst. Aside from her, though, the rest of my coworkers were great. We communicated and worked as a team to get everything done, regardless of what specific task was assigned to anyone, so I was hired basically on what she'd like to call support. This basically meant I did a lot of the menial prep and restocking tasks that no one else wanted to do. Which was fine because with my experience, knife work went faster for me than anyone else, but because of that experience I was also relied on pretty heavily by the rest of the cooks to help them out with their tasks. I did not mind this because, like I said, we all helped each other to achieve the common goal, and everything got done by the end of the day. Everything was going great, and we were running smoothly for about 4 months after I had started, and this is where we get into the beginning of my compliance issue. After 4 months, we lost a couple of team members, and they ended up getting replaced with people that did not really fit into the chemistry we had built up so far. Overall, they were lazy, took constant breaks for 20+ minutes at a time, and had to be babysat for their entire shift. If they were not explicitly told to do something, they would just sit around waiting for direction. The rest of the remaining crew did their best to work around this and train them, so we could get back to the cohesive teamwork we had all gotten used to, but in the meantime, a few things had started to slide and some tasks were not getting done. Nothing major, think something like not replacing the juice in the drink machine or refilling the stash of coffee by the coffee makers, just stuff like that. And well, Jessica had a real issue with this, but because she's never actually working with us to see where the problems were actually stemming from, she decided to start pointing fingers blindly and making changes. She called all of us into a meeting where she had printed us all lists to remind us of our job duties and responsibilities. I read over mine carefully, and here's how the conversation went. Me, hey Jessica, I see on my… Jessica, let me stop you right there. This is not up for discussion. This is what you were hired to do, and this is what you'll be doing. If all of your tasks are not finished by the end of your shifts, you will be the one responsible. Coworker, Jessica, this list does not even include… Jessica, again, we are not here to discuss. You have all been slacking and you can all consider this your verbal warning. She turns to look directly at me. If the problem persists, we will take disciplinary action. I walked out of that meeting laughing my rear off. We typically worked 8 to 10 hour shifts and the entirety of my list could be completed in 2 hours or less. I talked to my friend who was already having the same thoughts I was, and we both agreed to just let it ride and enjoy the crap show. That list became my Bible. I had it on my person at all times for every shift, just neatly folded in my back pocket. I showed up every single day with my earbuds and got started on all of the menial BS that was on my list, like cutting fruit, restocking the snack counter, refilling the coffee machines, and I made sure to set up my station at the closest possible point to Jessica's office. So every single day my coworkers would come back to me asking for help with whatever they were doing, and each time I would very calmly reach back and pull out the folded piece of paper that had become my personal Magna Carta and pretend to scour over it as if it was my first time reading it and reply with, "I'm sorry, coworker, I just don't see that anywhere on my list. I cannot help you. You should ask Jessica." Loud enough for her to hear, with me being so close. My coworkers started to catch on and they would come back to my station multiple times a day for me to put on my little song and dance routine, each time pulling out my little piece of paper and adhering the word printed on it as if it were the law. After a few weeks of this, the tension had really started to build between Jessica and I, as the issues we were facing before the meeting only continued to get worse. But what could she do? I mean, she made her decision and she would sooner drop dead than admit she was wrong. Eventually, after enough complaints from clients and other staff members, she would let go. It was a bit anticlimactic, but I actually left not too long after that. I told everyone, with her gone, work was just too boring. I didn't have anyone to go battle with, but in reality, my second job had really started to pick up and I was able to go full-time and switch careers. I have heard from friends that they actually promoted one of my old coworkers and he's doing a great job in that position and everything is running smoothly again. My thoughts and prayers go out to anyone who decides to hire Jessica in the future. And the last one is another story from r/maliciouscompliance and is titled New Boss, He didn't last long. So I worked for a company that repaired chips and had a dock/main office facility that was located about a 30-minute drive from the main city where most staff lived. Our normal office/workshop hours were standard 7:30 to 4 p.m. After the chips were fixed at this facility, they were sailed south a further 40 minutes drive by car. When this occurred, staff would clock in at 7:30 at their normal dockyard office and then pick up tools and equipment for the day and drive their own car with work gear the additional 40 minutes south. Going home was the reverse: leave southern facility at 3:30 p.m. and arrive back at original facility at 4 p.m. for clock off, also returning company tools etc. from the day's work. This was an accepted practice that everyone was happy with. The new manager comes along and says, "Why are all you people clocking on and off at the main office when you should be starting and finishing at the southern facility 7:30 and 4 p.m. respectively?" Well, next day, all staff then drive directly past the office and arrive at the southern facility for 7:30 start. They then have to get tools and equipment for the day's work back at the main office, so they then grab one of the side trucks at 7:30 a.m., then drive back up to the office, 40 minutes, past where they just had come in their own car, and return another 40 minutes, and then start work with the day's equipment at 8:50 a.m. As there are only 2 side trucks between 20 staff members, some workers never get an available truck to get their gear for the day, which means lots of standing around waiting for equipment and tools, and to make things even worse, the reverse had to happen at the end of the day. All equipment needed to be returned to our office each night, so the 1-hour 20-minute return trip also needed to occur so that we could finish at 4 p.m. on site, as he instructed. This meant equipment needed to start traveling by 2:40 p.m. to get up and back for 4 p.m. clock off. This was not a very productive initiative from the new boss, and once he started this nonsense, the malicious compliance by all staff basically saw him move/be moved on from his position within 6 months. Because, to be clear, work completion rates dropped by over 50%. Damn, it was funny when he tried to rescind his directive. We were all having none of it, as we were never obligated to carry company owner equipment in our personal vehicles. We just did this in good faith. And yeah guys, I would say that is the ultimate play stupid games, win stupid prizes story. Please don't forget to check out my playlist on the left, and I will see you again tomorrow.